Well, welcome back, or welcome. We're having a great discussion, Tony and Nick, looking at readings to do with leading change. And thank you very much, Tony and Nick, for joining us. And if you're joining us in the YouTube recording, you might find down the bottom there's an opportunity, there's an orange screen. I think you can click in and participate. You get to see thumbs up or thumbs down. So we're going to have a discussion about a reading by Lisa Ehrich and Fenwick English, Leadership as a Dance, and thinking about the metaphor to help us understand leadership. So if you really like something that Nick says and you want to give it a thumbs up, or something that Tony says and you go, yeah, I agree, or if there's something that I'm saying and you're going, I don't agree, I want to tell you more about that, you can indicate, and other people will be able to see it on the video later. I think it's a really cool way to do some asynchronous discussion. We've got 4 questions, and I'll put them underneath the YouTube recording. So if you'd even like to put some of your answers down there and put answer 1, you know, it took me this long, you might leave your thoughts for other people to learn from. I know Nick and Tony, I always learn when we talk about things together, so thank you very much for joining us. The first question I want to ask you is about this reading. It was quite a long one, so I'd like to know, how long did it take you, and maybe initial impressions, something that you found interesting or something that you found challenging. Who's going to go first?
I'll go first.
Thanks, Nick.
Yay, Nick.
Okay, so first of all, I just want to put out that I really liked this reading. It was so refreshing to have a creative kind of spin on leadership. I really liked that. It was engaging, and it was well written and structured, and it flowed really nice for me. I took notes on everything as I went because I was so into it. And overall, it took me like 3 hours, but I don't think it felt like 3 hours because I was really enjoying it. So yeah, that's probably what did I like. What did I like in particular? I don't know, the whole thing. I guess I liked the metaphor as a dance is really cool, I think, because once you start thinking about leadership as a dance, it just opens up so many more possible ways of understanding it. So I think that was probably the most enjoyable thing for me, once you kind of get it.
All right, thank you. Tony?
Yeah, I found the reading quite challenging at the start. I suppose I'd never really thought about how could leadership and dance be connected. The metaphor didn't sit with me, I suppose, initially. So it took me a while to get into the article, and it took me a long time to read it too, so the best part of 2 hours. As a mum, I suppose it was very stop-start though, so perhaps, you know, I could have maybe taken less time if I read it from start to finish, but I would go back and read sections that I didn't quite understand. And even reading it through the second time, I got a better understanding of what it was saying or what the authors were saying. So, and I actually appreciated that it challenged my thinking. And as Nick said, there's that creative slant on leadership. So it's nice that we can start to blend, you know, that creative, the arts industry, I suppose, in with what's been traditionally business and management and leadership, and start challenging our thinking. So I really love that it challenged my preconceptions about leadership and got me thinking about other ideas, I suppose. So yeah, it was a great article.
That's good to know that it was worth your investment in time. I think there's so many blog posts and things that you can read, you know, eight tips for successful leaders, you know, 5 things leaders must know, and there's that sense that maybe there is a secret formula, there's a recipe that successful leaders follow these 10 commandments or something. So I think this article is partly in response to that idea that leadership can be a formula, and it's saying, no, it's actually more like an art form. There's that notion of Eisner's connoisseurship, that you can't actually pin everything down. There's got to be some interpretation, and there's that cooperation that happens with followers, and the context, and you have to pay attention to all of these. So the metaphor is a way to try and conceptualize leadership maybe differently and acknowledging that it involves artistry and intuition and emotion and symbolism and, you know, the body. I don't know. We're not going to break out in a dance, but I think thinking through the metaphor has been helpful and challenging. So I'm glad you raised that word, Tony. I want to ask you, how convinced were you about the metaphor? So you said it challenged you. Tony, I'll go to you first. Can you think, is there something from the article that you found really quite helpful? If you wouldn't mind thinking aloud for us.
Well, there was lots of different parts that I found helpful, and as I said, it challenged that traditional thinking. Coming from an accounting, business type background where leadership, you know, has been done the same way and taught the same way for, you know, using traditional theories for centuries. It was a nice, I suppose, refreshing way of looking at leadership, and I liked how they talked about all the different components, you know, the music, the actors, the audience, the tempo, the whole, I suppose, what would you call it, the whole dance, and associating leadership with that. It took me a while, but I could see it, I could get it, and talking about the different contexts that we work in as leaders, and bringing in, you know, community. For example, in a school environment, there's always the parents and community that you have to deal with, plus the teachers and the students, and you know, all of those other government bodies that you have to deal with. So I could see it was almost like dance, but also a bit like dodgeball as well, where you have to move with it to and go with the flow sometimes. So I really thought it was an interesting and challenging way of thinking about leadership.
All right. Nick, can you talk us through in a little bit more detail why you were convinced? You said you really found it convincing. Why?
So Ehrich and English talk about, specifically with the dance, how like different people have different dance styles, and I don't know, like it really struck a chord with me that my style of leadership or my dance of leadership won't be the same as somebody else's, and even if I don't like their style of dance, I should be able to find a way to appreciate that form of dance and see it as beautiful or see it as relevant to me and the organization that I'm in. And coming from a like mostly followership kind of role, not much leadership experience, I definitely look back on my time and I think, wow, I was probably really critical of that leader and their dance, but you know, realistically, like maybe they didn't have much other choice but to dance that particular way. So I guess, like, yeah, style for me was the big, really like standout moment when everything came together, and it was like, as Tony said, like when the contexts all come together and you're dancing a particular way, you should be able to look at that and be like, oh wow, like that's a particular way of like leading or dancing, and that's relevant to the situation and that works for them. Yeah.
And I think that's the beauty of a metaphor. Sometimes it helps you get a big picture feel for the way all of the parts work together. And I'm just looking at the article on page 18 and 19, and some of the ways that the authors are drawing the metaphor together, that the leader's sensitivity to movement and space, and to how their own presence and the presence of others work in the world. That idea of a capacity to read what's going on around you and to have that empathy or compassion. So what you were saying, Nick, is that it is probably framing a way of understanding others a little bit more clearly for you, which is great. Shifting between modes of attention, and maybe not always having to look at things from that fully rational, bottom line accountant perspective, but looking at the emotions that are going on and the stories and the interplay. And that the rhythms, I think that was a really nice kind of way. There's often when you're leading change, there's that sense of what's the rhythm and what tempo, and when do I need to speed things up, and when do we let people, you know, slow down a little bit and enjoy a breathing space before we actually push them a bit harder. I think for me, the idea is, you know, there are some leadership styles or dance styles you might be used to, but to have to learn a new one, you can feel a bit uncoordinated for a while, or you might have sore muscles, or you feel like you don't look the best that you've ever looked before. There's a little bit of vulnerability in learning something new like that. So I think for me, the idea of fluency and rhythm and understanding that you don't always look great when you're learning new things, which is in a change situation, that tolerance for mistake making maybe, or risk taking. I don't know, if anyone was going to try and teach me to dance, they'd have to work a little bit hard. And I think patience maybe was another word that came to me about the whole leadership as a dance. So the more I'm thinking about it, the more I'm thinking it's quite helpful, and there's that nice ambiguity. So metaphors can make us come at an idea from a different way. So I think that's really helpful. I want to go over to page 25 and through to page 32, because Lisa and Fen talk about 5 tensions, and they're saying these are perennial tensions for dance and leadership. And I think sometimes tensions, we can sometimes represent them as either this or that, but I think the space of tension is often something that's really creative and generative. It doesn't have to be either or. You can say, okay, how can I do and maybe? So there's that tension between discipline and passion. There's the one between the status quo and social change. If you're coming in as a leader and you're wanting to lead change, how much attention do you pay to this, what's here, and how much do you go, no, we've actually got to change a lot? And there's also hierarchy and democracy as another tension. And I'm just looking for, I haven't highlighted the other ones as quickly. Mind and body.
Mind versus body. Yep.
Yep. And the whole, I think in Western traditions we've really said it's all about the mind, and there are so many leaders that we know who have poor health because they've just pushed themselves really hard and, you know, not thought about the whole body. I don't know about you, if you've ever cried in a situation, whether your leadership was thought to be weaker because you had a body. I don't know. What's the other 5th tension that's gone missing from my...
Tradition and innovation.
Oh, there it is up the top of page 27. Yeah, thank you. Yep. Tradition and innovation. You know, how much do you maintain the story so people feel safe, and how much do you really push through with innovation? So I think even knowing, okay, let me think about those tensions as I'm about to lead change is helpful. I'm wondering if you're thinking of yourself as a leader or even as a follower in a change situation, which of these tensions do you think has the most relevance for you? You're thinking, yeah, I'm dealing with this one. Nick, do you want to start us off?
Yeah, I can go. Okay, so the big one that I struggle with, I think, is the discipline versus passion. I'm that person that when they get passionate, they're just like, forget everything, just go crazy with it, like, don't hold back, like, just go for it. And I think as a leader, I tend to do that as well. Like, and I'm in like a group assignment or whatever, it's kind of like, oh my gosh, I'm so excited about this assignment, guys. Like, I'm just going to do everything myself, and then we're all just going to read it, and it's going to be perfect and amazing. And you can't operate that way. I think you have to, as a leader and as a follower, be able to pull yourself back a bit and be like, okay, so like, what do I really need to contribute here? What is really needed of me? And how can I use my energy to give 100% to my role rather than trying to do everything myself? I don't know. That's probably the biggest tension I have.
Yep. It sounds pretty good, and it sounds like through reflecting on it, you're being conscious of it, which I think is a really lovely leadership trait, being aware. Tony, what about you?
I think discipline and passion was important to me as well, but the one that struck a chord with me was the tradition versus innovation, because I think for innovation to happen, there needs to be traditions already in place. So you've got something to compare it to. So to me, innovation is about looking at what's currently there, so the traditions, and deciding what are we going to keep, or what are some new ways that we can do this to make it better. But it doesn't mean you necessarily remove all of the traditions, because some of those are quite useful. So and they're traditions for a reason. They've been around for years and been used and tried and tested. So it's about finding that balance between what innovating, I suppose, just for innovation's sake, or are we actually making this a better process or a better way of doing things. So to me, that's a really big tension, is finding, okay, what have we currently got that works well, and if it's working well, why change? What does need to change, and what are some innovative ways that we can do that? So I suppose it's blending for me, those two, the traditions and the innovative new practices. So I think, you don't necessarily throw the baby out with the bathwater, that you actually need to keep some of those traditions and bring in some new innovative practices as well.
I think I have a similar tension there. The status quo and social change is a little bit similar as well, where I quite enjoy change. I like to try new things, and it's taken me a while to acknowledge that not everybody enjoys that experience, and you've got to think, how do I keep the narrative going between what is existing, the traditions and the status quo, but then not being slowed down by people who just want the status quo. They're saying, no, I don't want things to change, knowing that there is, we have to make some changes. There might, if we don't change, our organisation is going to become obsolete really quickly. So I think learning that people will go through a period of discomfort when their status quo is challenged, because status quo is where people have really reached a place where they're quite comfortable. So innovation can make you feel uncomfortable, and I think for me as an educator, I'm learning that change involves people learning, so you're actually leading people's learning, and that it's okay to feel uncomfortable, and it's your role as a leader or maybe a choreographer to say, it's all right that this feels unfamiliar, we're going to do this together and find ways to make that change safe. So I think those tensions are a nice way for me to frame the way I understand other people's experience as well. So not just go with what I find easy, but to think about what other people may find easy and difficult. So that I guess they're nice, almost self-assessment or evaluative things to help understand a change situation. I think there's the last question we're up to already, but right at the end of the article, page 32 and 33, the authors are starting to make some recommendations. Well, how can you then use this metaphor as a leader? And they're sort of recommending things that maybe we can start to use the language of dance, like improvisation, fluidity, rhythm, imagination, grace and beauty. So rituals, passions, symbolism, the body, all of these could be understanding leadership as a performance. It's not something that is something that some people always have and other people don't. It is embedded in a context and it's social, so it's something that is more like a performance than a box you can tick, yep, that was leadership. So I'm wondering, what is something that you think, as a leader, you will take away from this reading? Is it new language or is it something else? Who did I ask for first last time? I forgot. Whose turn is it to go first?
I think it's my turn. But,
okay. Oh, Tony, don't look so happy.
I think what I'll take from this, Jill, is that it's challenging the way that we think about leadership and starting to use some of that terminology. Like I love the word grace. I think that leaders, we talk about good leaders as leading with grace and dignity and passion and all of those key things. And I think that that's great that that's attached to leadership. And I love that when we start talking about creative arts and, you know, the left and right brain almost communicating and challenging how we've traditionally thought of things. So I think for me as a leader, moving forward, it's broadening your mind and opening your mind that there's other ways of leading than just following the traditional ways of leaders that have gone before you. So everyone has to find, as Nick was saying, everyone has their own rhythm or dance that they choose. And it's like I have different music that I listen to when I'm in different moods. Well, again, and different dance, I suppose, that I like. And as with leadership, I think that you can take those bits of your personality and form your own dance or your own leadership style. So I think that that's what I take from this article, is that challenge the way you lead and find your own style, your own rhythm, your own dance, and your own way of leading others.
I think that's a really important point, because when there are books you can pick up at the airport or lists, you can think, hang on, I'm not being a good leader because I can't do all of these things. So that permission to explore your own strengths and to think about yours as a dance style, that's a really nice thing. Thank you, Tony.
That's okay.
Nick, how are you going to help me learn? Give me some insights. What are you going to take away?
So, like, definitely for me, the biggest thing, like, playing off what Tony said, was that idea of style. So I was thinking, like, you know, like when you watch, like, so you think you can dance, or like you've got talent or whatever, and you watch these people on stage, like you can kind of think of that as like a leadership kind of show. Like, so you think you can lead, and you watch people lead, and you kind of like, oh yeah, I really like that particular leader's style. I'm just like you would like a kind of dance on, so you think you could dance, I guess. And you kind of look at that leader and you model yourself after them. And you're never going to get there 100% because you're just not them. But it's your own spin on it. It's your own take on it. And if you can get it to work for you, and you can get it to work for your organization and your context, then I think, you know, that's success. That's what's working. And part of that, like, you can't be afraid to change things. Like, some days you're going to wake up and you're going to think, like, okay, so I have to get these three particular things done. So you go in with a very structural, very ballet, like vigorous, like dominating kind of way to do it. But then other days you wake up and you're like, hey, look, you know, we've got these things we have to do, but we can bring in some outside people, and, you know, we can have a bit of a rave, and we can all just go crazy and not pay attention to anything else but what's going on in the music. So I really like that point, like that idea of style and modeling and changing and being fluid was my biggest word, I think, like that fluidity. And I think as a student, if I had heard more about the fluidity of leadership, I would be more inclined to view people differently when I look at their leadership, and be more accepting of it, that not everybody's going to be the same type of leader.
So we're all going to go away being more gracious and understanding and better human beings, because we've had this opportunity to do some learning together, and I think that's a great outcome. And I think now I'm going to be watching those reality TV shows, so I think I can lead, and, you know, all right, I'll be looking for my style. So thank you very much for joining us once again, and I really appreciate the wisdom that you've been able to share, and the passion that comes through really clearly. So thank you, Tony and Nick, and thank you. If you're going to be contributing later on to the discussion, I'll be keeping an eye on it and learning from you as well. I'll see you later.
Bye, Jill. Bye, Tony.
Okay. Bye, Jill. Bye, Nick. Thank you.
Thank you.